I think I'm just going to start off the show today by asking Scott something esoteric and letting him talk for 25 minutes.
Let's do it.
But seriously, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest edition of Yell Fight Sooie. I'm Andy Tomchesson. That is James Christopher. And wearing all of the Arkansas regalia today is Scott McIntyre. And as such, it makes sense because Jim and I both have unranked baseball teams. And one of us, and the other of us is going to be a national seed. Baseball America right now has Arkansas hosting as the fourth national seed, and I think D2 baseball has D1 baseball has you the fifth seed. Either way, hosting in the first round and scheduled to host a super regional as well, should things go well. The other of us have a harder road to hoe. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
You just gave every reason why I'm doing great.
Texas is only 2.5 out of the Big 12 lead. Of course, I know the season's over, so but still, they're ahead of OU.
And that is your true rivalry, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit. Looks like A&M baseball is going to make the field, which with the way we've pitched this year is a minor miracle. We finally started hitting, and we're not doing horrible record-wise, but we give them a whole hell of a lot of walks. So making the College World Series and then making a run seems far-fetched at this point, but for the two of you, May and June might be good months. Looks like Arkansas has a tough remaining schedule, but college baseball is basically over before we get to tournaments. We've got 2 weekends. Arkansas gets South Carolina at home and then Vandy on the road, or do I have that backwards?
That is correct. Yeah, with South Carolina comes into town this weekend, comes into bomb. I mean, look, South Carolina's a top.
Yeah, y'all have two very tough final opponents.
Yeah. South Carolina's for real. They're on a 4-game losing streak, but Arkansas has proven that we can lose games or win games in bunches as well. So it should be interesting. Arkansas's got some arms that are coming back healthy, but there's still a lot of questions in the bullpen and even a couple of questions out on the field. Not exactly where you want to be with 2 weekends left in the season. Still question marks on what roles guys are playing. When you're a top 5 team and you're expected to get to Omaha, well, you might need to do that. So, yeah.
And it looks like A&M has Bama this weekend, 3 games at Bluebell Park, and then we go on the road to Stark Vegas for Mississippi State to close out the regular season before the SEC tournament. We've played better of late, but we still have pitching problems, and that's just part of the rebuild that Schlossenagel's going through. He got lightning in the bottle last year. This year has been a little bit more of a struggle. There's some good pieces, but we still need to build through NIL and recruiting the way other teams do. Having said that, where we're being projected, depending on where you look, might be in Stanford, which looks like a very favorable field if that's where we end up, or it could be in Charlottesville. So everything's possible, but this looks to have been a rebuilding year for Schlossnagel and A&M. Texas, on the other hand, has 2 series remaining as well. One with San Jose State, and then they're going to wrap up at West Virginia next weekend. And for those of you wondering why Texas is playing San Jose State, it's because Iowa State hates.
Just a correction. I have that on my schedule. I have that game as West Virginia coming here. So.
Oh, even better for you. Good job. But the point remains, Iowa State hates women's sports, and that's why they don't have a baseball team. I don't know any other reason. That the Big 12,
most women I know think baseball players are hotter. They also just hate women, I guess.
The Big 12 has 10 teams, only 9 of which play baseball.
Yeah. And
I know we told Jim there'd be no math on this episode, but it is one of the many reasons, probably way down the list, but one of the reasons that Texas and OU will be moving to the SEC after this upcoming athletic season, because it just means more, and it means enough that everybody has a baseball team.
It just means more. Look, 11 of the 14 teams in the SEC are probably going to go to the tournament. I mean, the only if your state starts with an M, you don't have a team in the postseason, but everybody else from the SEC looks like they're going to make it. That's a strong field. You bring Texas and Oklahoma over in the same mix. I mean, you're legit, what, 13 teams? I mean, are we really going to see that in the future where it's just a given that 3/4 of the SEC field is going to make the postseason baseball tournament? I think that's almost a given. Which
I think, yeah, and I'm curious of Jim's opinion on this, but this move only makes the strongest baseball conference in NCAA stronger by far. I mean, the next closest now is going to be the Big Ten, and they don't play baseball for real up until what, April?
Right, because they're under
It's a
snow.
lot of road games and a lot of rain, a lot of snow outs
Yeah.
up there in Big Ten land. The Pac-12 used to be up there, and they're going to lose USC and UCLA, and so they become less of an issue from a baseball standpoint, which is a problem for the NCAA if you want the sport to grow and be a revenue generator.
And outside
and
of Stanford, there's there will be no regular baseball power left.
Oregon State has a good team historically, but you're right. There's just not a lot of there. Arizona, I guess, as long as they stay in, has a chance to be decent.
Yeah. But the fighting AJ Hinches, man, that's all that's really going to be left.
But the move really does the recent round of realignment really has weakened not only the Pac-12, but it's going to change the Big 12, and I think weaken them from a baseball profile standpoint because you've taken out your two of the top probably 4 baseball programs out of that and put them into the SEC, and the SEC is still going to put 14 of 16 teams in the field every year.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
but it goes back to what we were talking about when we started talking about this realignment. This Texas OU move to SEC and the USC UCLA move to the Big Ten is the beginning of the end of how we think about college sports. Like, it's going to go down to what we all, I think, have universally agreed will be a 32 team or whatever number it is super conference anyway. So, it'll be uncomfortable and one-sided for the next maybe 3 to 4 years before we start to see that shift.
Yeah, it really does deplete the Big 12 baseball wise. You get Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. That would be the two schools that are, that have somewhat of a tradition, and Texas is really kind of new if you stop and think about it. You look at the teams coming in. Cincinnati, no. Houston, they're probably in a position to where Houston could create a good baseball program there. Central Florida may be the same thing, but there's no way you're replacing what's leaving. I completely agree with Jim. This is the beginning. These are the the first steps in moving towards a super conference, whatever the number of teams it may be.
It's interesting you bring up U of H because I think most of us on paper just go, oh, U of H, they've got a good baseball program. And historically, if you look at it, they haven't really been a competitive baseball program in probably about 25 to 30 years.
Yeah.
It's remnants of Bill Yeoman coaching that team and being really involved in the local Carl Young leagues and those kind of things in Houston. And I think there's a perception that doesn't necessarily match the reality with that. So that's not.
They also got.
I think they have the potential to use Big 12 recruiting in theory to get back to a better talent level at some point, but
they also got pandemic, and I only know that because when college sports shut down and then also affiliated minor league shut down, Round Rock basically joined a collegiate summer league for a season, and essentially the entire University of Houston Cougars was one of those teams, was the Round Rock Harrymen team, and we got to watch them up close. And I think a lot of those players really felt like that was going to be the year they were going to break out. And then 2021, they had a lot of players leave, not come back. And it really, I think, submarines whatever progress that program was starting to build, which I think is hilarious because it's university. So who cares?
Maybe the Big 12 can, since Iowa State doesn't play baseball and Dallas Baptist is actually really kind of good, and they're located in the right place. Maybe they can just add Dallas Baptist as a baseball playing member.
It's going to be interesting to watch, and I think more from a football perspective, because I think there'll be a fun football conference to watch, especially if you have no rooting interest one way or the other. You just want to see a game that's really high scoring, the way the WAC used to be back when we were all kids.
Yeah.
you didn't really care what was going to happen with UNLV's football team, but somehow they were going to put up 56 points, and that's fun to watch sometimes. That's where I kind of see the Big 12 going, unless they can. I don't see that conference surviving. I don't see the Pac-12 surviving unless those two organizations merge in an intelligent way.
Well, I think also,
but even then, they're still the minor leagues of college sports.
I just think it's I think it's one of the things that's going to be really sad about college sports, particularly college football, where it's now going to be so focused on whatever that number is that bowl games will become less and less important, less and less fewer people will care, and I think it'll end up being a really sad state that we're in. We can't go backward, like you can't stop progress, but I think it'll end up being not as fun a product overall when we get to where we think we're heading.
Yeah, it really will feel like more like a specific, like a training ground for the NFL, or to use Jim's example of college football. Whatever the sport is, I think a super conference really then feels, I don't know, it takes on a different feel.
Well, it kind of brings me to my next topic, because one of the things we're going to hit when we come back for football is this concept that this is Texas and OU's farewell tour through the Big 12. And so you've had it'll be a little bit less than 30 years, 28 years of Big 12 football action for the University of Texas. And, one of the things we're going to lean on Jim to do is provide us, just memories and things he loves about the Big 12 that he's going to miss every week for the entire football season. Well, since he's not paying attention right now, that is silence as a committal.
No, I'm definitely paying attention. I was trying to think I was trying to come up with a joke.
Anything.
But I've also got Vader here giving me ideas. But no, I mean, look, I think that the last 10 years of the Big 12, really with A&M's departure, so however long it's been, the Big 12 has been a joke. But there was a time when it was a really, really good football conference. And I do think some of what we've lost is the regionality of the sport. And I think that's a little bit of a bummer that I think we're going to be missing. And I think there'll be plenty of content to actually talk about reflective of Big 12, especially because I think Texas is going to win the conference this year. And I think they'll win it in its first and last year. And that will be kind of cool.
Yeah, I don't think I appreciate the A&M plug, but I think the Big 12 changed with Nebraska leaving, with Colorado getting really, really bad before they went to the Pac-12.
72-3 in the Big 12 championship in 2005. Yeah,
I mean, and you're right. When in 1996 through probably 2002, the Big 12 was as good a football conference as there was. You had Nebraska at its height. You had Texas that was very competitive. A&M was very competitive. OU was on the rebound, but getting there with Bob Stoops. Colorado was a very, very good program. And you had a surprise season mixed in there with everybody except for Baylor at that point. Baylor was horrible. Even Kansas had a run with Mangino and some other guys in years of the Big 12.
Well, you look at Tech. You look at Tech with Leach also. I mean, yeah, seriously, he's throwing the ball all over
100%. And there was innovative football. If you like defensive football, there were teams that keyed on defense. There was a lot of interesting styles that played well together. And when whatever happened for alignment, you lose Missouri, A&M, Nebraska, Colorado, and you eventually replace them with TCU and West Virginia.
Jessica keeps forgetting they're in the conference too. She's like, she was looking at the schedule for baseball and going, why don't we have 2 non-conference series in a row? No, babe, we don't.
They're still there. Because even the ACC wouldn't take them.
West Virginia, where their basketball coach is going to get paid $1 million less and has to undergo sensitivity training because he can't not say a certain word. So, yeah.
You know what? It works out for Morgan.
Yeah, there's a deep drive to left field. Sorry.
It has worked out for Morgan Wallen. He says that word all the time, and he just keeps selling out tours.
God,
no repercussions for him.
Morgan Wallen sounds like the whiskey you buy if you can't afford Old Granddad. I'm just going to say that. And what'd you get? I didn't have a lot of cash on me. I just picked up a bottle of Morgan Wallen. That's going to leave you with a headache.
I'm pretty sure Morgan Wallen is what they were serving at the Embassy Suites hospitality hour.
Yes. Yes, it was, and it was also what all the girls on the bride to be buses that were circling Nashville is what they were drinking as
The
well.
good news is though, I had to strip some paint in the garage. And I had some Morgan Wallen, and it took it right off.
It does. It really does. I mean, it takes that first coat right off and leaves that second coat behind. It's really efficient.
It really is.
Hey, whoever handles the marketing for this show, if you could put Morgan Wallen in the tags, we're going to get hits.
I
Just
absolutely
please.
will.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost. It probably actually though it tastes better than a glass of Spencer Rattler. I'm just gonna say, I had to get the plug in.
Every Diamond thinks that joke's funny. All right, good. We've checked all the boxes. We can continue.
Everything's been ticked. We've talked about what we have to talk about.
All right. Last little piece of business, and we were going to talk about this last week, but we had some scheduling difficulties. On May 30th, the spring meetings for the SEC happen, and that's where all of the head coaches and ADs will come. It's mostly ADs, but there will be head coaches there because Nick Saban runs the Alabama athletic department.
All
right. And that one of the things they are going to have to decide on is the schedule format for the SEC starting in the 2024 season for football. To that point, Texas's AD, Chris Del Conte, and OU's, I guess, is still Joe Castiglione. I don't know because I pay no attention to what happens at Oklahoma because they're dumpster fire right now. But those ADs will also be invited because the SEC has a big question on their plate. Do we play a 9-game schedule or do we stay with an 8-game schedule? There's a couple of ramifications to this. For everybody who's uninitiated, I know we've talked about it in the past and you probably read about it. There will be no divisions in the SEC after this season. So it will just be one big SEC. You will either have in an 8-game schedule, one rivalry game that you play every year, and everything else will rotate through the other 15 teams or 14 teams, not counting yourself. Or it'll go to a 9-game schedule. You'll have 3 permanent rivalries, and then everybody else will rotate. Either way, you're going to play every team twice in 4 years, home and away. The rub seems to be that because the SEC has gotten in bed with ESPN exclusively beginning after this season, ESPN doesn't appear to be in a position or desire to give more money outside of an incremental increase for adding Texas and OU. And so there's a couple of arguments that I want to go through with you guys. One is more inventory should mean more money. So if we're playing 9 games, that's more SEC competition. That's less of playing a Prairie View or a Texas State in the middle of November, which is the norm for SEC schools right now. But the pros of that are that you're going to have more teams that are bowl eligible because you can book in certain wins. And there are a handful of teams now that are in favor of staying with 8 games. That includes teams like Kentucky, like Mississippi State, a few others, because bowl eligibility is still a big deal for programs because it's more money. There are other schools, Alabama, Georgia, A&M, surprisingly is one of those, it's surprising to me anyway, that want to play a 9-game schedule. And the benefit to that is less clear other than there should be more money tied to it, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen.
Right.
So I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about what your feelings are on where it's going to head and where it should head. And we'll start with Jim.
Well, it's funny because to me, I like variety being the spice of life. So for me, I would lean toward an 8-game schedule just because it's cool to see other teams. Now, I don't necessarily want that team to be Prairie View A&M. I don't know what the solution is, but one of the things that I do sort of get bored about is the same, 8 or 9 teams every single year. It's not that big of a variety of what you get to see. And so I think I would be in favor of staying at 8. I don't like the idea of no divisions though. I think that and I channel this because it's often, as you guys know, been a topic of where MLB might end up going someday, of no divisions. And I think having something to play for outside of ultimate goal, I think is good for fan bases, and I think it's good for schools. And so I would want to stay in divisions. I know that wasn't the question, but I think I would lean 8 games for me as a fan.
Texas currently plays in a conference that has no divisions. How has that played out since you've gone to the one true champion format where everybody plays everybody.
Well, I think you all know because we talk independently, but I think it's fucking stupid. Especially when the very first year you had the one true champion, you didn't have one true champion. So no, I think that divisional play is good and essential. And I guess we'll have divisions again this year, maybe, because we'll have, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I have not enjoyed the sort of amorphous, wow, you could end up playing OU in October and then 2 weeks later play them for the Big 12 title. Whereas if you were in divisions, that's going to happen fewer and fewer times. So I'm in favor of divisions.
Yep. Scott.
Actually, I agree about the divisions. I think Jim makes a really good point. When the top team versus the second place team are playing each other for the championship, that doesn't have the same feel to it as if the East versus the West champions are playing each other. And maybe that's just something in my brain, but it feels better that way. Overall, I would like to see the 8-game schedule. Simply because the team I pull for, Arkansas, is one of those teams that is struggling to get to 6 wins many years just to get bowl eligibility. So from a very selfish standpoint, I absolutely would rather schedule the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff than Alabama. Just to throw that out there. One of those games seems like more likely of a win than the other.
I was going to say, Jim, you don't have to play Prairie View. The Arkansas State is available.
Well,
they are, and Butch Jones is the coach, and he's horrible. So now's the time.
I'm glad that Scott agrees with me because I think I don't always see the other angles to things, but it also seems like it's better for the conference if you have more teams bowl eligible than not.
Yeah, so the knock becomes that people will take the shot, right? If you get 4 non-conference out of games, let's look at Arkansas, for example, like Coastal Carolina, BYU, and then somebody like some directional school somewhere or state school at really Pine Bluff. If you look at that, I mean, that's going to help you get those wins, and BYU is just going to be easier, and Coastal Carolina are just going to be easier than the traditional SEC games. Going to 9 conference games with 3 permanent opponents means you're rotating through the other 6. Okay, well, some years that's good. I don't know why it works out this way, but when Nick Saban's extra 6 always turn out to be like Vandy in Kentucky, South Carolina on down years, a couple of Mississippi school. I mean, how does he get that? And then we wind up with Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, all of the big heavy hitters. That's just how things have worked out. So I don't like the 9 games for that. I do also think that as a conference, you still got competition. The Big Ten has gotten better. The ACC is still really solid. Notre Dame's still out there. I think there's a lot to be said for playing that extra non-conference game and making it a worthwhile opponent from one of the top schools.
I've always dreamt of an actual Texas Notre Dame situation, but even to your point, in the pod thing that Texas could be in, that's 3 teams that are going to love nothing more than to take their shot at Texas, right? That's going to be Arkansas, A&M, and OU. One of those is a rival. The other 2 are other schools. But I was waiting for Andy to react. But
if you're Texas, that's one of the reasons you chose to move, because you do get 2 of those.
I'm sure that's why the school, but I'm talking about as a fan.
But I think it's valid because if you are Chris Del Conte and you've got trouble with your home schedule and selling tickets.
Yeah.
Because there has been that issue since the Big 12 changed 12 years ago, where every other year, y'all frankly have kind of a dog of a home schedule, and it's hard to sell Kansas State as a big rival coming in November.
You're right. No,
and so now, no matter what, you're going to have Arkansas or A&M in a 9-game schedule. You're going to have Arkansas or A&M at home every year. That helps your ticket sales. In an 8-game schedule, you play A&M every other year, maybe.
Well, no,
OU would be your permanent rival.
I understand the business side. I'm just talking about Jim's stress because at that time of year, it's also October baseball, and I've got a lot to worry about, and I don't need anything extra.
Well, you could do like Scott and just root for the Cardinals, who evidently are now the worst organization in the
I am not
league.
going to have any problem.
I feel like we need to have
about
Scott
October
guest on
baseball.
Go Astros just to explain to us what in the fuck is happening down there. Because
Well, I think they could also set some perspective for Astros fans who are freaking out that we're one game over 500.
yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, Scott, I'm making you a formal invitation. If you're free on Monday, jump on Go Astros with the three of us, and we will figure out. Because if you'll remember, we used to talk about, hey, Andy, that's the organization we wanted to be, and now it's like, ooh.
Right now, you don't want to be it. That's for sure. But let's talk about happy baseball and Arkansas baseball and football and things like that. Yay, woo pig Sooie. For once in my life, I actually would rather talk about the Arkansas program than traditional winning programs. Yeah. No, I do think though, guys, they're going to wind up with 9. I think they're going to wind up with 9 because this pod thing has been floated for way too long. I think it's out there. They're just trying to. I honestly think that they went into May thinking that the 9-game schedule was just going to go through, and then they found out that a lot of people were pushing back, or a lot of schools were pushing back. I think I heard that it was like 7-7 split or something like that. Andy, did you hear the
8-8 because they're counting the Texas.
8-8? Yeah.
Well, guys, is it possible to have an 8-game schedule but also maintain a 3-game pod? Because
No.
I do like the idea of an annual rival, but I just like the idea of one other little uniform to look at.
No, and I'll tell you, the SEC schedule maker is a little bit weird. And so when they added A&M in Missouri, they set the schedule, and it was 10 years in advance, and all this stuff happens. We have been as an A&M fan, we have been in the SEC for 12 years. This will be our 13th season. We have yet to have Georgia come to our stadium, and we have yet to go to Kentucky because they can't figure that out. It's a little bit easier with 16, but the whole point of 8 is that you can do one permanent rival and then rotate through the rest of the teams and get a fair enough representation. So a student athlete has the opportunity to play at every stadium in a 4-year career.
Can I interrupt with some breaking news that has nothing to do with this show?
Sure.
I think you just did.
May 12th, Jose Altuve begins a rehab assignment with Sugarland tonight. That is weeks ahead of schedule. Weeks.
That doesn't make Scott feel any better about the Cardinals.
I know, but it gave me a little chub, and I wanted y'all to share in it with me.
Sugarland's attendance just went up tonight. I mean,
say I might drive down.
I mean, no, I will say this though, guys. If they go with the 8-game schedule and you only have the one permanent rival, that really does lend itself to the one division concept also, because you're rotating through so many other teams and you don't have, the standard teams that you can control who you're against, whether it be your pod or your division or whatever. The 9-game schedule actually, if you have 3 permanent rivals and then you're rotating through the other 6, they could control that in such a way to where you're kind of playing the same bit of teams, and it would set up for divisions better as well. Just thinking about that, about through that, whether they're going to go back to divisions or what that would look like. If they go with the 8-game schedule, I never see them go back to divisions until they change that. But inevitably, ultimately, they're going to have to wind up going to a 9-game schedule. Well, I mean, it's just, especially if you're doing a super conference, of 48 teams or whatever, and how this splits up, it's going to be a 9-game SEC schedule.
I also tend to think this is a little bit of a game of chicken with ESPN, because ESPN has been non-committal about extra pay for extra inventory. Fair enough. So if you're willing to say, well, great, we won't give you the extra inventory, we'll find out how much it means to ESPN to have that many more games added, because frankly, more people are going to watch Texas play Mississippi State than they are going to watch Texas play New Mexico State. And that's typically who that other opponent would be. It's going to be a school of that level that has availability in November because that's how the schedule works out.
I so badly hope Texas has to go to Mississippi State their first year in the league, because I want Jim to experience the cowbells. Jesus. God.
I do think ESPN is going to pony up. I think that the nature of how to make money on traditional television is fading, and then pretty soon this conference is going to be the only game in town, and you don't want to open up a window for your rival Fox or something else to roll it, or to roll the dice and come in. I think they'll pony up.
I'd be happy with ESPN announcers and broadcasting teams if we could get Fox's technology, because ESPN still shows most of their games 720p. And
Yeah,
it's a big difference when you go from that CBS
because
cable
all that
league.
money's going into Mandalorian, baby. That's why.
All right. So, final programming note, fans, we are going to go on hiatus until probably mid-August when the football camps open up and we have the actual news. We all, oddly enough, have lives and schedule conflicts, and doing this every week when there's very little to talk about, it was just not a service to you guys. So we want to make sure that everybody that's listening, I think we're going to move to the format of being a football-centric show, even more so than we already are, because we just spent 15 minutes talking about a sport that's not happening until August. But we will be back mid-August. We will have the same three announcers repping our schools, with more to talk about, and hopefully some really competitive football seasons to be happy about versus what we had this season with just Jim being happy.
And maybe one College World Series title that we'll be able to talk about.
I do think Texas can do it, Scott. I agree. I do think they can get on a roll. I mean, they are the traditional powerhouse in the sport. So thanks for the faith, man. I appreciate that.
It'll be a fine bounce back year. Yeah. Let's go with Texas. Let's say that was Texas. Yeah.
And you will be able to still hear us. Andy and I, of course, will still be doing Go Astros on Monday. Scott will be all over Let's Get To. I know, Scott, we're going to have you on next week on Go Astros. I wasn't kidding about that. We will figure it out. And then Scott and I are going to be on Let's Get To live on June 1st on Thursday night with Eric Schmidt, the owner of the Spearfish Sasquatch. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So if you're going to miss our dulcet tones, you can still find us on the network.
Didn't I tell you to have a broadcast partner there that wasn't relying on snark and sarcasm for everything?
Yeah, Erica has a home game that night, so that's why it's
all right. That's good.
I figured our choice was snark and a pulse or not. So Eric's at home. So
can we get a shirt made, snark and a pulse?
That's what we should.
I think that, yeah, you can order that at certain bars. If you order that in the wrong place, no, snark and a pulse is fine. But if you order snark and a pulse and a heartbeat, that's completely different. And sometimes they have to take you around back for that. So don't add in the heartbeat. Just take the pulse.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this week in this season of Yell Fight Sooie. I'm Andy Tomcheson. For representing your Texas A&M Aggies, I don't speak English anymore. That's James Christopher representing your Texas Longhorns. And in the Ozarks, in the beautiful, beautiful Ozarks, Scott McIntyre playing a banjo, trying not to drool, representing the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Go Big.